was most unlimited assertion. His first phrase that came out of his mouth was directly given towards them. Now, what I want to do briefly, and here again, couldn't resist to tell you about the text. The word text. Now, what intrigued me is how did they still have the text or the manuscript? How did that happen? The ancient Egyptians, hieroglyphics, originated as one of the first alphabets out of a pictographic language. So it wasn't far done when the cavemen didn't have the alphabet, they had pictures. So the cavemen, as we know them, didn't exist, 1 million BC. That was a good movie. I think Bridget Bardot was in it. Anyway, sorry about that. But nevertheless, when the ancient Egyptians began language, it was a picturesque. And all the pictures and symbols represented an alphabet. The language was like reading a picture puzzle. Recently, hieroglyphic writings samples has been found about 300 miles of Cairo, Egypt, and it dates 3,300 BC. So they have discovered, and I had pictures of that, where they have found the early Egyptian writings as a picturesque. And I always wondered, how did Moses write? When did writing start? How did they communicate? We don't have any idea how Adam communicated other than talking. I don't know. The ancient Hebrew language originated out of the various languages of the Mesopotamia people. Writing was a function way of communicating when the early books of the Bible were written. Job chapter 19, look at Job chapter 19. Job chapter 19, and look, I think at verse 23. Job 19, that's right before Psalms, isn't it?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Psalms 19. And we're looking at verse 23.
Job 19, yeah.
Said Job, what did I say? Thank you for correcting me. Boy, I tell you, I'll be lost.
Job 19:23.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were printed in a book. Now that's a King James rendering, a modern rendering. And Job said that they were graved with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever. So here we kind of get the idea that how they printed and what are the writing materials and instruments used in those early human race. And as we look at Job, oh that my words were written, oh that they were inscribed in a book, that they were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and lead forever. The iron pen and the stone was used at one time for writing. And we have seen scenes in which, they took a stone and they had another sort of a hammer and, they kind of carved out what they did. Dorothy used to use that when she was younger. And the evidence obviously has been uncovered by the archaeologists. And Job was one of the largest, oldest books in the Bible, and they've discovered that. And so they are called manuscripts. You may wonder how one dates biblical manuscripts. I know all of you have asked that question. There are many factors that are considered with a manuscript. A manuscript is a scroll. Number one, the materials. How did he have the materials? The material that the manuscript could be are tablets, stones, bones, wood, leather, metal, broken pottery, tapestry. They use a lot of material. Well, the form of the ancient books could take on the form of a scroll. The writing surface could be tapestry, leather, or some other material, and the pages would be glued together and rolled in a stick. And sometimes the rolls could be 6 feet. However, not quite 6 feet. 6 feet's not all that long. And they would write and roll it up, and then they would seal it, write another book and roll it up and seal it. And some manuscripts were bound in a book formed like that, and the manuscripts today is called a COX, COD. CODOX. I think that's how you spell it on me. Let me see. Where's that word at? Somewhere here. COD, sorry. EX. CODEX. Then there was text divisions. This would include how the writer made divisions and gave titles to chapters. And back in the old days, when they very first started, when you saw a Bible, when they wrote the Bible, the author, the person that was transcribing, the paper would be like this. I'm not an artist. And this is the center, and this is the page. And what they would do is, this would be Job, and chapters down this one. And then there would be, this was the edge of the paper. And what they would do is they would transcribe pictures, and they would be colorful. So they would transcribe the pages here, and then they would add their own artistic thought in it. And it was each individual person did that. And these Bibles later on in time was so expensive that only the church could afford them. So even from the early days, they would do that. Now, the point being is, early manuscripts had very little punctuation. It was a continuum. If you read some of the writers, John Bunyan and John Bunyan and those writers, the whole page would have no punctuation in it. It was just one. They never stopped the punctuation. They didn't stop to think. They just kept writing. They wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And you could condense what they say. If they wrote a chapter, you could condense what they say in a verse or in a sentence. So the first list of the Old Testament manuscripts in Hebrews was in 1776. And they listed 615 manuscripts that had been found in the libraries across the town. And then later on, another publisher found 731 manuscripts. And so then they continued to find manuscripts, and there are more than 200 biblical manuscripts that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And some of them were written in the Hebrew alphabet. And they were written before the year 70 A.D. 14 scroll manuscripts were discovered in 1963 that had been hidden in the Dead Sea caves. They hid them. You remember when captivities come, they went and hid the scrolls so they wouldn't be destroyed, and they stayed hid until 1963. Isn't it amazing? The Dead Sea Scrolls provide biblical manuscripts dating from 250 BC to AD 50, over 1,000 years later than normal. And so when they compared the manuscripts with the other ones, they were 95% accurate. Now, I don't know if you've ever to analyze and to explore a passage of the Old Testament. Have you ever, and we went through this on a Sunday morning a couple years ago. There's not one complete Old Testament in existence. Can you imagine when they were made out of leaves, how long it would take for them to be destroyed? There's not one single manuscript, a scroll, like with Isaiah, that doesn't exist anymore. There's no one that's existed. And it's interesting, as I went through with it, how did, when there's no original scroll of the Old Testament, however, we have various manuscript copies, and it is possible, piecing all of the thousands of pieces of manuscripts in part, that they have arrived at a understanding of how our Bible is written. That was not easy. And secondly, then when Isaiah he only made one copy. Isaiah only wrote one copy. Paul only wrote one copy. And as I said in our earlier classes, scribes had to take Isaiah's original scroll and transcribe it onto another piece of leather, and they wanted to be as accurate as they can, word by word and verse by verse. But over the years, a word may have been left out, or a dot may have been left out, and some word may have been added, and another word may have been added. I mean, in 600 years, and all the scribes, you can see that. And I remember reading out of the King James, and I preached a sermon, and I said, now and I left out a whole sentence. When I was reading from the New American Standard, the New American Standard leaves out an entire line that was added by the King James people to put more emphasis. It didn't change it. It just emphasis on the verbs. And so when I said this was not in the original, then the accusation comes, well, then you have misused the Word of God. But what happens is that in translating and adding, is that once 1963 came along and they found all of these new scrolls, and the complete work of some books were in there, and when they transcribed them into English, they discovered that certain words and certain thoughts was not in the text.